final week for Texas lawmakers to get bills passed before this session ends. One of the bills now headed to the governor's desk clarifies when Texas doctors can perform abortions. Here to help us understand it is Jeremy Rosenthal with TexasDefenseFirm.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We wanted to start off, let's go back to when Texas passed its abortion law. At the time, it was one of the most restrictive in the country and didn't provide a lot of exemptions. Can you break down what it included?
Very overarching, very sweeping measure. Did not provide for any type of exception for the health of the mother. Did not provide for any rape or incest exceptions. So a very overarching and all-encompassing ban on abortions is what has been in place in Texas. There are some laws that have sort of indirectly allowed, in essence, for medical emergencies for doctors, but the problem has been that those are not very clear, and doctors are really scared to assist at all in certain instances. And that in turn resulted in several deaths in the last 2 or 3 years, which is why there's been a push for a need for clarification for doctors and to make sure that the medical providers and the legal professionals understand what the current rules are with regards to abortion.
So now looking at the bill headed to the governor's desk, what is that language now and what does that mean for doctors and lawyers?
The main change is going to be that it does not have to be a life-threatening situation. It does not need to be what we would call imminent. In other words, there still has to be some type of deadly or potentially fatal aspect to the pregnancy in order for a doctor to intervene. However, it doesn't have to be happening this minute, and the doctor doesn't have to wait for it to get to that stage. The issue with the previous interpretation was that there was with the imminency, meaning again that it was right then and there, and it was an emergency in the moment. Would be that the doctor's essentially saying, look, we shouldn't have to wait until it gets quite to that close for us to be able to intervene. So that's the main issue that has been clarified. Also, it allows the doctors to define in their own reasonable medical terms what that life-threatening condition would be. In other words, giving more deference to the medical professionals in these situations. But under Texas law, it does still have to either there has to be a risk of death or serious bodily impairment. Again, very, very broad and subjective terms, but I think the goal for the legislature is broad enough for doctors to at least have a little bit more comfort with.
And there are still penalties for providing an abortion outside of the scope of this bill, correct?
Current Texas law has several penalties for abortion or providing an abortion or assisting in an abortion. In one instance, it can be what's called a second-degree felony, which is 2 to 20 years, or if for performance, could still be 5 to 99 years or life. So very serious consequences under Texas law for providing or facilitating an abortion. There is it's worth noting too, Texas always has what's called a necessity defense, meaning that you can always defend a case, and it's not even an abortion case necessarily, but it could be any case that you could think of. Even in driving while intoxicated cases, there's what's called a necessity defense, meaning that we are trying to avoid a greater harm by acting in a certain way. I bring up driving while intoxicated because there's been cases where people have had their homes invaded, they've been at home and intoxicated, and they've said, well, I had to get in the car because it was an emergency. Those types of defenses, I think, could be available in abortion cases as well. But the problem is that doctors are terrified of stepping out on that limb and using such a defense because they're afraid it wouldn't work for them and that they would get in trouble by assisting somebody in dire medical need.
Jeremy with TexasDefenseFirm.com. Thank you so much again for your time today and speaking with us today.
Thank you. Have a good day.